right, welcome to today's session of the Edge of Things webinar. Today with me is an interesting two colleagues from Bosch.io Bulgaria. But before I introduce them and introduce the topic of today, I would like to just remind folks who are attending the call to participate in the 2022 IoT and Edge Developer Survey that we have. You can do that by clicking on the green button you see on the screen. So if you haven't taken the survey, please do it now. And also for folks who would like to ask any questions, please feel free to do that by using the chat box on the right side of the screen, or by clicking on the ask a question button. So thank you, and I hope my volume is high enough for you guys to hear. I'll do my best. All right, so with me today is Dr. Konstantina Gramatova. She's the Senior Product Architect at Bosch.io with nearly 10 years of experience in embedded software development, device communication protocols, integrations, and new edge computing trends like cloud-native technologies and local compute and data processing and AI enablement. She's a PhD holder with a proven track record from different universities in which she collaborated in various projects. She's an unsettling OSS campaigner by heart, and the result of her work is Eclipse Kanto, which is the topic of today, a modular IoT enabler for edge devices. She's been involved in Eclipse Kanto before its birth, obviously, and when it was just a bunch of sketchy boxes on a whiteboard behind the closed doors. Wishing that the project would be an open source and developed on open source one day. Also, I have with me Elena Gramatova. Elena, she's the lead product owner and software engineer director at Bosch.io Bulgaria, with nearly 14 years of experience in the area of IoT and edge computing, from technology and product development through delivery and consumer engagements to involving shaping up new software products that best fit the ever-changing market dynamics. She's been with the Eclipse Kanto together with Tina, forming a magnificent team of proficient edge experts ever since they faced the need for a next generation edge software that became a reality in October 2020. At Bosch IoT Edge Agent, they are now bringing in the open source. So welcome Dr. Konstantina and welcome Elena to today's discussion of the Edge of Things webinar. I'm glad to have both of you with me today. And before we start, I would like to just ask you, in the midst of the evolving technologies within IoT and Edge, if you can just give us an introduction about Eclipse Kanto. But before we do that, what would be, you say, the top challenges that we currently face, part of the digital transformation journey that we have?
Hi everyone. First, thank you for having us. I hope you would have an interesting and insightful 60 minutes with us. And now back on the question at hand. In the area of IoT and Edge, we have been witnessing certain trends. Basically, organizations are trying to get more value out of their devices and out of data that they produce for usage and business use cases So we are now facing paradigms like connected buildings, connected mobility, connected goods, connected manufacturing, where basically so well-known devices or entities are becoming a complex connected products that produce data and that run on really diverse hardware, operate with really diverse data, which imposes a lot of complexity. For example, we want to have connectivity to leverage the data. This adds some concerns about security, about looking into various cloud ecosystems. We also have variety of hardware with limited resources. We also have the need to operate in various use cases offline or without connectivity. Organizations also need faster development cycles for their devices and connected products. So more or less, at the end, organizations are facing repetitive challenges when they try to bring their connected products and digital services to the market. We are also witnessing these general trends like shifting the value, the logic, and the applications from hardware towards software, from the cloud to the edge. We also see a huge need for local computation and the execution of intelligence or machine learning on the devices, which really ends up into a really complex system with various types of software and firmware on the device that need to be managed and that need to be kept up to date so that the products that we are now creating are future proof, and we can ensure that they're up to date and needed updates and upgrades are provided. So more or less, these are some typical challenges that each organization would face or are currently facing, and they try to solve it by themselves, in many times even lacking the right competence or the needed time to do so. And with Eclipse Kanto, we are really aiming to help organizations better solve these challenges by bringing some of the key capabilities needed in the open space.
Nice, nice. So, so Eclipse Kanto as a modular IoT edge software for devices that enables AIoT with all the essentials. How does Eclipse Kanto solve these challenges that you were mentioning? You said that this could be done through adopting open source and open standards and ecosystems approach. So off to Tina. So adapting cloud native technologies for cloud neutral edge. How do you see Eclipse Kanto technology building blocks and key capabilities evolving?
Like a dream come true. Okay, just kidding. At least that's my dream. Yeah, so first things first, thanks you for having us today, and I'll try to kind of give you more insights on exactly regarding that. So there are two main things, and they're the two key pillars that we adopted when we started defining, creating what we want to bring into the open source and enable devices with. The first thing, as I already mentioned, is adopting standards and interacting with different ecosystems already there. And the second is kind of more on the technical approach and what benefits can we get out of having integrated different already existing technologies that adopt these standards, but in a special manner so that we actually fit into the use case we have. What is our use case? So in general, if you want to enable a device for AIoT and bring all the essentials like cloud connectivity, like management in the form of files, in the form of getting some metrics or status from the device, but still having the ability to be an edge device, which means that you're cloud independent and whatever happens on the device is absolutely transparent to what cloud you decide at some point to get this data to. So how we achieved all of that? first things first, if you have a constrained environment, you should be lightweight. How can you do that? The only way is to be very careful what you're getting into your device and the software stack that's running on your device. And this means that you cannot just pick some technologies and get there. You have to cherry pick whatever features you need that serve best your context and leave everything out. On request, if someone decides that has the resources, that's great, we added them. The second thing is how you deploy your applications at the edge. So from experience back in the years, if you run everything natively, then you always kind of scale up your problems only. What I mean by that is how you deploy applications, how you update these applications, how you make sure that they do not ruin your device's resources and runtime. And the out-of-the-box approach that you would find is, of course, containerization. And the idea is to adapt it so that it works dynamically and good enough in a constrained environment. Of course, when you get these applications running, they get your data, you get to the point where you have to connect your device and store this data somewhere. But of course, that should be possible to happen with minimum customization. So if you at some point decide that you want to have something quick and you just take out some backend of choice that works for a couple of days, you get everything running. At some point, you decide to scale up, choose another backend, then that should be transparent to whatever is happening on the device, to the local communication, to the data that's flowing on the device. And that's another thing that we aimed for. And last, but especially not least, you have to be flexible. What I mean by that, we are modular by nature. And the reason we have done that is that you have to be able to pick only the capabilities you need. If you're some device that just wants to get some data and store it to the cloud, or you'd want to do some additional local processing with GPU acceleration or whatever, then you would need different capabilities to achieve that. But no one has to enforce you to add some software that you do not need on your device, which is constrained either way. So this was actually the fourth pillar. And the flexibility is something that is actually ensured, and at least in my opinion, can only be ensured if you go for public specifications and APIs. And I think that's a topic that Elena might jump into and just briefly walk us through what we have decided to get into our project, like specifications, different integrations with ecosystems, and so on.
Okay, yeah. Basically, apart from the really techie specifics and how we leverage various technologies, adopting them on the device that Tina just shared, the other super important point to actually solving these challenges and the ever-growing complexity, especially for on-device software, is really leaning into open source, leaning into existing ecosystems, leveraging existing knowledge and software technology building blocks that are collectively created and that are reusable and configurable thanks to really basing their communication with each other on various open standards or open source projects. So for Eclipse Kanto, in order to bring each of these key capabilities that we mentioned, we are leaning into such open source projects that are already there as part of Bosch Iot's ecosystem. For example, we depend on Eclipse Home for connectivity. We use Ditto for device twin, Vorto for modeling of the capabilities of the devices. We use Mosquito for the local communication, Hopebit for updates, and for containerization, we basically have a really flexible layer that works with available container runtimes that are open source, like Containerd. We also depend on a lot of artifacts from Mobi, and we are basing our containers management on the OCI standards. For the deployments, or basically how you typically get Eclipse Kanto, or how you typically get these key IoT enablement capabilities on your device, we look into integrating with various Linux-based ecosystems and supporting different types of deployment models, like providing Yocto meta layers or integrating with Kubernetes, providing snaps management, or running on various Linux-based systems. We are also really looking into various standards. So standards should not be like a fixed goal, but rather if they are really actively developed and adopted in the industry that they're relevant for, we are looking into them and seeing how they basically fit for various use cases in different industries. So, for example, we are looking into Cuvisa, VSS, and VSC in terms of representing data, open telemetry for different metrics, logging, tracing. Industry 4.0 is also interesting for managing various industrial assets, as well as other aspects like what Etsy has to bring in terms of edge computing standardization or anything else that might fit into these key essential capabilities that we want to bring out of the box. Also bringing some integrated solutions in different use cases and domains. This is something where we are looking into.
Yeah, sounds great. So, yeah, we're going to be jumping to talk about the use cases in a minute. But before we do that, so the key differentiator for Eclipse Kanto is really being flexible, containerized, lightweight, and connected, which will provide enterprises anyway the ability to have some integration. So back to Tina. So if we are to talk about some of the building blocks and key capabilities for Eclipse Kanto, you can just walk us through some of these technology building blocks. What do you think they are the top building blocks for such technology?
I would. Just one question. Are we sharing this nice picture we have for the architecture? So
yes.
that people can see this one?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
As I don't see it here, just make sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can see this one in our website as well, but it's interesting to have a brief walkthrough without many details. Maybe as we are talking about edge devices, it would be interesting to come from bottom to top. So on devices, generally Kanto targets Linux-based systems, and currently we have integrations out of the box with Debian-based ones, for example, like Raspbian images, Debian, and different deployments, like for example in snaps for Ubuntu Core Ubuntu, and we are step by step getting into the Yocto ecosystem via layers, but that would be a future step, not already out of the box yet. So having this Linux OS, then we have our isolated applications deployment. And in this case, we have this building block called container management and orchestration. It's a pluggable building block because from different use cases we have from different experience. So OCI might not be and containerd might not be the perfect fit because every device and every setup, it might be an existing setup you want to bring up to the open, or you want to connect via Eclipse Kanto and you have something already running like LXC or LXD or even Kata. So this is a pluggable component. You can run on top an engine on a runtime of choice, which is great because then you have a unified API on top, and you can lower the migration steps for your applications if they are already such existing. And okay, on the next level we have software updates. This is the other pillar that we have there. It's the mandatory building block. You cannot have device management without providing firmware updates and software updates for your application. Again, the API is unified. So from the backend perspective, you have a single API that manages your firmware, that manages your containerized applications, and you do not have to worry about orchestrating n number of services, having them in the backend to do so. Edge management, this is the building block that currently comprises of, for example, the mentioned file uploads that we out of the box in the repository. You can see this file upload component. You can use it with AWS, with Azure. Out of the box, you can configure it whether it would be on time basis, whether you can trigger some file uploads when you need, for example, to get some logs out of the device or whatever. Of course, system metrics. This is the other interesting building part of this building block, let's call it this way. Of course, all of these components cannot work together simultaneously, even in when your device, for example, loses communication, remote communication. Then we have local communication. Currently, we rely on Eclipse Mosquito. This is not something that we provide, we just use it on the device. And on top, we have the Cloud Connector component, which is actually the gateway to the different backend components you have. What is interesting for this Cloud Connector component is that it actually maintains one remote connection, and it's capable of serving it, for example, reconnecting if the connection fails and so on. And on the southbound side, it's responsible for actively keeping the local communication intact and utilizing different buffering, different messages, queuing, and so on and so forth, so that at the time you have connectivity, then you flush whatever you're having on the device to the backend of choice. So out of the box right now, Bosch Iot Suite, so history. And of course, Hono Ditto Hawkbit, which is actually the open source counterpart of all the services that are running there. Really nice integration, having all these projects in Eclipse IoT. So that's nice to have them all there. And something that's already on the way is the Microsoft Azure IoT Hub connectivity. And soon that will be also an available one in the open space. What's maybe worth mentioning is that actually the local communication keeps Ditto and Hono as specifications. So regardless what's your remote connection, you always have this digital twin based on Ditto on your device. You have Hono for communication and Eclipse Vorto for modeling of your data and bringing semantics to the table. So overall, that I think are our main building blocks.
Nice.
For Eclipse Kanto. Yeah.
Nice, interesting. So just before we move on, for folks who are following us, in case you had any questions, please feel free to drop your question in the Ask a Question button or in the chat box on the right side of the screen. So if we are to move a little bit and talk about real-world use cases, what do you think, Tina, are the most common use cases that Eclipse Kanto would really contribute in, and to what level you would consider Eclipse Kanto a success factor in these contribution to the various use cases?
Well, one thing I like about this project, to be honest, it's not right now, for example, something domain specific. It's flexible enough to fit into different domains and enable them with all the essentials to bring this end-to-end connected products and solutions. There are different examples we can give for already existing solutions, with also some exploratory things we have done in the last couple of weeks, let's call it, even months. So some interesting ones are, for example, the SDV, the software-defined vehicle use case that we have. There we serve as an enabler, for example, for the applications management on the tiny device called car, in this case. And as well as cloud connectivity, because you cannot have this remote management of applications without cloud connectivity. Other use cases are, for example, in industry. This is the so-called.
Worth mentioning.
Yeah.
It's probably worth mentioning before you move on to a different use case that the Eclipse Foundation has announced the software-defined vehicle working group earlier this month. So you might want to go and check the press release on eclipse.org.
Yeah. Big news for everyone doing that. Now it's a big challenge to get there. And yeah, actually there are really interesting projects there, and what we try to do is actually be the enabler regardless what we can do there. And like different use cases that we have in the industry, as already mentioned. So Bosch Linux IoT software system, this is the Bliss, so-called Bliss. There we try to enable, again, applications management in the base of containers, remote connectivity to different backends, and so on. So there are, again, different use cases there, implants and so on. Different hardware integrations, like, for example, the Control X hardware plus offering that's already there, and a lot more. But in general, maybe explorations are also interesting, like something we did for the automotive context as well with Eclipse Kuxa lately. That was an interesting exploration, kind of being able to enable all the VSS data and just bring it out to the cloud in really not much time, to be honest, which was really cool. But all of these things, I think, in the end, matter if you manage to make the digital transformation journey easier for the people that they're doing, for the different parties that are included in all of that processes, because you have developers, you have product owners, you have all of these different parties that in the end won't have one goal regardless. They want to bring up their product quickly and have a smooth journey doing that. Yeah.
Sounds great. And thank you for sharing some of the use cases that Eclipse Kanto would be taking part of. So for folks who are listening to us that they would like to try out Eclipse Kanto, how they can do that?
Well, they can try out our first milestone release. In our milestone release is available on the GitHub of Kanto project repository. It's a Debian package or plain binaries. And to help you start up quickly, we have provided getting started documentation on the website. You can find it under the documentation link on it. There are different types you can get started, purely open source with some home sandboxes, or you can try out some free subscription on Bosch Iot Suite. So that's the easiest way to get started and explore the features we provide.
Cool.
Yeah.
So in terms of, if we are to look ahead in a futuristic look, what would be the roadmap moving next for Eclipse Kanto?
Oh, I think Eli can share this one, or?
Yeah, okay, even though you're doing pretty good job so far. So basically what we were now trying to achieve as a really first huge milestone is to launch the project and bring some of the really key features already available in the open source, and we have already provided, as Tina said, some getting started documentation. We have our very first milestone release. that includes really the essentials to get you started with your IoT device development. So what we plan doing in the future is providing more features, of course, on one side, and on the other side, providing more enablement for users and customers and partners that want to get onboarded quickly. This would include more detailed user documentation, different builds that might be needed that would really help the onboarding process, including building all the essential elements of our CI/CD pipelines so that the development is smooth, tests are executed, and so on. In terms of features, we have now a roadmap with certain capabilities that we are also open sourcing, and we have also features that we currently develop with different customers or interested parties around the project. As Tina mentioned in the beginning, we will be bringing as a next batch of features, let's say, the cloud connector for Azure that we basically developed in the context of the SDV project. We also are bringing our local digital twins support, support for bootstrapping and some system metrics. And in future, we would be adding more enhancements around our container management layer, as well as integrations with different container management runtimes, or even looking into a more complex orchestration, which goes beyond the really simple container management that we currently have, that can happen via various integrations with already existing control planes or cherry picking certain elements of them, so we can fit a more complex container management use cases with, again, a really lightweight approach. And the other aspect is, as mentioned, various integrations in terms of deployments. We are currently working with Collabora and also some internal Bosch entities to create a purchase integration. So basically bring the Eclipse Kanto capabilities into a purchase, so that we fit into the industrial IoT scenarios that we were mentioning so far. And we are also looking into bringing various Iot to meta layers so that various configurations of Eclipse Kanto can be easily built for Iot based systems. Of course, this is just a snapshot that we know as of today based of what we have heard as demands and requirements and needs, and based on certain use cases or integrated solutions that we're aiming at. But this is something that we would drive based on the community and based on users and their needs. So hopefully we would soon establish map and what is happening in the project.
Interesting, interesting. I mean, be sure to check eclipse.org/Kanto for all of these features and future releases that comes up, and also the github.com/eclipse-Kanto for all the GitHub issues over there. Sounds interesting. Really, what's cooking up. So. I was very glad to see all of these features being integrated part of the project development on the go. I think as we move as we move on with the discussions, I mean, it's worth reminding folks about the survey, the developer and adoption survey. If you haven't taken the survey, please do it. It's also important, I guess, to remind our dear audience that the IoT and Edge Days is coming up in June. So stay tuned for the program plan and announcement end of next week. There's an exciting lineup of talks from our partners at the IoT and Edge Native and Sparklight Working Group. So stay tuned for that. So I have one comment and few questions here from. So the first question is from Muhammad Assal. Hi Muhammad. Is Hona and Ditto planned to be running also on the edge? He's asking.
Should I answer this one?
Yeah. Tina?
Okay, maybe we should ask the folks from Hona and Ditto as well. But
yeah. So the answer to be confirmed, Muhammad. But I think yes, there are some plans for Hona and Ditto to be running on the edge. Anyway, I'll be reaching out to you separately on that topic, Muhammad. He's also asking why is OCI is not suitable for the edge, and whether we did consider a Cube Edge project before building Eclipse Kanto.
Okay, I guess that's another tech topic we can consider. So you can find different implementations and variations of Kubernetes and so on and so forth. In the end, what everything boils down to, you want to adopt a standard that can ensure your users or adopters a quick transition. So OCI is one of them. What is very important in Kanto is that container management is just one building block. So it's not the focus all around it. It's one of the building blocks, one of the capabilities for you to deploy your applications. If you want to do some orchestration, then no problem. As you already saw, there is different flavors you could go to. You can even integrate this container management component with, for example, a full-blown Kubernetes if you have the resources for that. You can integrate it with something else. It all depends on your use case. But what is most important is actually that you have a common API of these components, so they can interact with each other and they're loosely coupled. So if you, for example, would like to do an integration of KubeEdge and want to get its capabilities for orchestration and so on, if you can plug into the local communication, then you can do that as well. So, and regarding cloud connectivity, again, if you want to control it from different clouds, that's again somewhere you could plug KubeEdge if you want to, and get this capability for it.
So just to add a bit on that one, because I also check the questions in the chat, and we commonly get asked such questions. Basically, it's not a question of either or, it's rather an integration question. So it would be interesting to look into existing lightweight control planes that are, of course, compatible with some standards or public APIs like Kubernetes. And then see how they can fit into some more lightweight use cases, because it's not only KubeEdge. There is now a plethora of various lightweight components appearing for the devices, from containerization to more complex orchestration. This is definitely a trend to really leverage the standards, the existing infrastructure and tooling, as well as the benefits of these cloud-native technologies. In our case, we are rather providing this layer that you can use to really integrate different such container engines or control planes, but do it in a selective, lightweight manner for a concrete use case. So we would be looking into such implementations. There are also like North Star, or I think there are also several other lightweight implementations there. So it's a matter of what's the use case and which capabilities out of this you would like to be able to use locally on your edge device.
Indeed, and thanks to John for chiming in. I think there is a good point by raising that Open Horizon project has been doing similar work. So indeed, glad to facilitate anyway introduction to Tina and Elena for an opportunity for contribution. Sounds good. Any more questions?
There was one question for Eclipse Quora. I believe that now disappeared.
Yeah.
Maybe we can quickly touch on that.
Yeah, sure. The question was about whether Eclipse Quora would be running on the edge. No, it's not that one. Is it Eclipse?
I think the question was, why did we create Kanto instead of contributing these capabilities to Eclipse Quora? Yeah.
Yes.
So it's more or less, the answer qualifies more or less in the same category as the previous questions. And just a short background, we actually, before our Edge agent that is now being open sourced in Eclipse Kanto, we also have another OSGI-based product, which is former processed MBS or Bosch IoT Gateway software, now Bosch IoT Edge services. And basically, it more or less provides the same capabilities as Eclipse Quora or commercial product based on it. And our approach towards converging the capabilities in this product, which we're focusing on, for example, various gateway-based scenarios, like supporting a huge bunch of protocols for connecting devices that you cannot connect directly to the cloud, or deploying various OGI-based, in this case, applications that process the data for these devices, abstraction layer for this data, etc. And we wanted to combine these capabilities also with the super essential cloud-native capabilities that we have brought with the Eclipse Kanto, which are like the flexible cloud connectivity, the containerization, as well as software updates, and managing remotely applications and configurations on your device. And it's rather an integration. And it is, in our case, containerizing an image of our OSGI-based product and deploying it on top of a device that already runs Eclipse Kanto. So basically, we were more or less, or at least I was looking into Eclipse Quora, and also I noticed that there are some trends to introduce containerization as well. And was wondering really to reach out to the community and see if we can rather create such an integration between these two projects, really get the best of both worlds, let's say.
Indeed. So I was going through the chat box, and apparently seems to be an issue with the slides showing. Some audience weren't able to see the.
Seems to be a lot of issues actually in the chat.
So
I don't even see the chat, so you're fine.
So in all cases, what we're going to do is that we're gonna put the actual presentation in the description and the video recording on YouTube, so you'll be able to find all the slides in there. So apologies one more time if you haven't got the chance to see the slides running, but we'll make sure that the presentation is there for you to check. All right. Sounds good. I think if we have no more questions, to go, then on behalf of the foundation and the IoT and Edge native and Sparkplug working group, I would like to thank both of you for today's session. I think it has been a great session, except a few of the technical hiccups that we will rectify with our exactly. So stay tuned for the next webinar. We're putting together the program plan for the next session. So stay tuned for the news to come up. In the meantime, I wanted to really thank the audience for the interactive discussion and for posting questions, and thanks to John and Mohammed for that. Thank you, and your last words, Elena, Tina?
Well, thank you for having us. Thank you for your questions. And I would like to maybe close this discussion with a call for action. So I see here a lot of folk. Based on the questions that we got, I guess we are more or less really looking into the open source, trying to create value there. So if you see a use case or a solution where Eclipse Kanto could play a role, like enabling the device of an end-to-end solution, please reach out to us. We can look into it and see how we can bring this to life.
Sure. So the details of Elena and Tina would be on the last slide of the deck that we will have. So please make sure to reach out to them.
Yeah, maybe a little bit on my side. So first, thank you for inviting us, for having us today, for giving us the stage to discuss around Kanto, because I think in the end that's what's most important. So we have to find touch points, interesting topics that we can further contribute and take further. This is the reason why I could not say that I closed this discussion. I do hope we open this discussion and we actually continue it lively on the different channels you can connect, and would be really happy if all of you that has been our nice audience today. So thank you for joining. If you have any further questions, just feel free to continue the discussion via mail or whatever you decide to contact us when you see the slide with our contact info.
Thank you so much to both of you. It was indeed a great session, and we look forward to having you again, probably at the IoT and Edge Days. So this is probably another platform for you to amplify your great work with Eclipse Kanto. So thank you once again to both of you, and thank you to our dear audience, and I hope to see you soon again.
Thank you.
Thank you.